There's breaking new developments in the murder trial of George Zimmerman in Florida. As the prosecution may rest today, we are awaiting potential testimony from Trayvon Martin's mom, Sabrina Fulton. Now, earlier today, the prosecution called Zimmerman's former law professor, who gave Zimmerman an A, and testified that Florida's stand your ground law was frequently discussed in class.
He was probably one of the better students in the class.
Tell me what sort of things you addressed as it relates to the law of self-defense in Florida.
With Florida and other states, they have what's called the stand your ground law.
And did you cover that specifically?
Yes. They were very much engaged in class discussion regarding the issue, so I remember, talking about it, quite a few times.
Then, a gun forensic analyst confirmed Martin was shot at close range.
The clothing displayed residues and physical effects consistent with a contact shot.
Meaning the muzzle or the end of the barrel of the gun was up against the sweatshirt when it was fired?
Correct.
I'm explaining. You get it? You get it? So a contact shot, so what they do is a GSR test, right, for like blowback on the hands of the shooter, and then they determine where the contact was on the victim, now the decedent, Trayvon Martin. What she's saying, it was a contact wound, so it was pressed up against but not pressed into. So it's not like he shot him from a distance that the bullet traveled. It's consistent, in my opinion, with what the defense is saying and with George Zimmerman's previous statements, that he, in fact, was at close range, that he was on top of him, and that he was acting in self-defense. Someone else who's very close to me and right over here may see it some other way. Bob?
I think the prosecution got back in the case today for a very simple reason. This professor made it very clear that that Zimmerman knew everything about the stand your ground law, and in that stand your ground law, according to the professor, there are reasons where you could use your gun if necessary, but this was not an extreme enough case to do that. I think the prosecution's back in it, and it's back in it strong.
Okay, interesting.
I think what's going on over the last 24 hours is that the prosecution brought out the Sean Hannity interview with George Zimmerman, and they're trying to show a discrepancy between what Zimmerman said in the Sean Hannity interview and what he actually told police at another time.
Which was?
About knowing about the stand your ground law, whether he knew it or not.
He said he didn't.
He said he didn't to Sean Hannity. He told the police, I guess he did, or they're trying to prove that he did, in fact, know about it.
He took a course about it.
But really, when you think about this, and I just think back, do you remember everything you learned? Bob, do you remember everything you learned in college?
I never learned much in college.
Well, that's my point. So if someone said,
this guy's a wannabe cop, and the professor said that he got an A, and he participated a lot.
Who cares?
Perhaps, but that doesn't mean he actually remembers learning about the stand your ground law. I'm not trying to make excuses for George Zimmerman by any means. Well, I'm simply saying if you're going to hang your case on whether he remembers learning about stand your ground in college.
Exactly.
That was his principal area of education. And this professor said he participated in the class. He asked a lot of questions about it.
Fair enough.
And so he knows about it.
But it seems like that's a pretty weak thing to base your entire case on. I mean, look at the witnesses that they've called up until this point. Okay, John Tell, they've called an investigator to the stand. The investigator basically said he thinks Zimmerman is honest.
Right.
You had the medical examiner testify yesterday. She wasn't the one that did the autopsy, and when she was cross-examined, she made a strong case for the defense.
I mean, multiple blows.
Time after time, it seems, Kimberly. I mean, I'm playing sort of TV jurist. It seems like this prosecution does not have a strategy. I mean, I don't know what it could be from the outset, but if it's relying on this professor, they got to do better than that.
Well, they're relying on the fact that the guy flat out lied. He told Hannity that he didn't know about it, and the fact is he was an A student in the subject.
I'm going to deal with you in a moment, Bob.
Yeah, I know. You guys just can't stand the fact this guy could get convicted.
No, that's
what are you
not
talking about?
Not it at all.
I'm not talking about you.
All right, Greg, go ahead.
I just keep, when I watch this, I guess I'm not as deeply entrenched in this trial as the rest of America is. I mean, I find it hard to believe that everybody is so consumed by this because there are a lot of horrible crimes and cases that occur in this country. The press chose this one because it was racially charged, and we all fall in line, and now we feel that we have to justify the attention by covering it more. What I'm learning is that the media has an invisible hand in directing the story towards discontent. That bugs me. But when I'm watching this, I keep waiting for the Law and Order sound. Do you ever notice that when you're waiting for them to finish, Eric? When I'm done talking?
But they don't bring losing cases on Law and Order like this.
But can I ask you, when you say the media has an invisible hand in directing towards discontent, before or during? Both.
Before. I think what's happening, what's great about watching this is that you kind of learn everything the media got wrong.
Right.
That's you're going like, oh yeah, remember when everybody was really angry about this? That didn't happen. This happened.
So here's the deal, and so many of the people that you've even heard on Fox that are talking about this, legal analysts, have said, you know, this judge is bending over backwards, Judge Nelson, to do every ruling in favor of the prosecution. They're allowing everything to come in about George Zimmerman's past, but they're not allowing anything to come in about Trayvon Martin's past or propensity to fight, although there is already testimony in evidence from one of the eyewitnesses at the scene that Trayvon was on top of him in like an MMA, you know, kind of wrestling, mixed martial arts positioning. Bob, so to address your question here, I don't care if he got an A+ in every class he took, including stand your ground law. The only issue that is significant about is whether or not he told the truth about it, but it doesn't negate his ability to defend himself under the laws of Florida. That's what I'm talking about.
Why would he
I mean,
lie?
I'm a former prosecutor. I'm for justice in this.
Why would he lie about it?
They shouldn't have charged a second degree.
Lying? I mean, Bob, I took
because he told Hannity flat out he didn't know the law, and flat out he did.
But Bob, they're not mutually exclusive things. If someone would ask me if I remember child psychology from school, I would say, no, I don't remember a thing. You ask my professor, they would say I got an A.
You did?
Yeah, except if you were a psychologist today, you probably would remember,
or something
right?
like that. I don't know
this
if it was
guy's
today.
a wannabe cop, and he probably did remember those courses.
But Bob, how is that? Okay, so now George Zimmerman, because he's a wannabe cop, because he was carrying a weapon, because he took criminal justice classes and stand your ground, he has an obligation to die. Beat me to the point where I die. I'm just going to die because I don't want people to say.
He had a couple of scratches on his head.
You're missing the point. If he believed a reasonable belief that his life was in danger, okay, and he has injuries consistent with it, you don't go ahead as a prosecutor and charge a second degree based on implied malice, depraved hard indifference to human life. There is no evidence presented so far in this courtroom to suggest that George Zimmerman had some kind of depraved heart.
He had fewer bruises than most people in bar fights had. He had a couple of little cuts on his head and he had a broken nose.
Maybe due to your roadhouse life, I don't know.
It's like if I'm beating you up, senseless, and then finally you take
senseless?
out... Yeah, senseless, and then you finally take out a gun and shoot me. Are you remembering at that moment whether you took stand your ground law in college?
No, the question is...
Bob can't remember if he was here yesterday. Quit being crazy.
Hey, let's not start to pick on Bob thing here just because I'm taking...
But you're using the same argument. She can use the same argument on you that you're using it on him.
Well,
you don't remember anything. Which you often say yourself every day that you don't remember a damn thing.
Okay, I do remember this. I do remember that I saw the pictures of Zimmerman's injuries, and they are no more or less than you would get in a barroom brawl, and it ain't life-threatening.
Kimberly, can I just ask you, do you think that the prosecution overcharged this case of murder to instead of manslaughter? And is there any way that the judge can switch the charge down to manslaughter?
Not necessarily switch the charge, but the judge can say that there's been insufficient evidence presented for the case to go forward to the jury on the second degree, right? And the defense can ask for a directed verdict in that sense. And then they could try to go for the manslaughter. A lot of the elements are similar, but it's a lesser standard. But guess what? In Florida, he's still looking at 15 to life, because if a weapon is used, a manslaughter carries a life top. Now, for the second degree, it's also a life top. So he's looking at serious charges regardless. And I'm just telling you, as a prosecutor, it's not about winning or losing. You're supposed to seek justice. You're not supposed to abuse the power and authority you have working for the government. You don't overcharge cases because it's politically expedient, or you're worried about the mainstream media, or Al Sharpton, or the rest of what these people have to say. That is shameful.
But Kimberly Guilfoyle, prosecutor at large.
Isn't the beauty, though, Kimberly, that the jury doesn't hear all of us and read the papers and listen to Sharpton and all this stuff? It's just those people in the jury box decide.
Yeah, and that's how, that's how it should be. And FYI, the court is in a recess until Friday at 8:30 in the morning, and then Bob will be tuning in for all the latest developments. Yes, Craig?
Why do they call it recess?
That's not very
because they all go out and play in the yard.
There's no jump rope involved at recess in this type of court proceeding. Stay tuned to Fox for all the breaking developments in the Zimmerman trial. And